Daycare workers of Reddit. What is the most shocking family secret you have been told by a 3-year-old? Story 1. This isn't exactly scandalous. The shocking things I have heard usually involve abuse. We had a family from Texas move to the daycare I worked at in Illinois. The boy would try and tell us stories, but we never could fully get all the details for it to make sense. It would usually go like this. Boy, you know who's bad? Me. Who is bad? Boy, the black man. Me. Who? Boy, the black man is bad. He hurts people. Me. What man? Why does he hurt people? Boy, the black man. He's scary. After a few weeks of this, the boy was the one to always bring the black man topic up. I finally was able to discover that the black man was Darth Vader. I had assumed that perhaps this southern family had a streak of racism, but it just turned out I was prejudiced against Southerners. I used to call Darth Vader Bellhead when I was little because I couldn't remember his name and I thought his helmet looked like a bell. Story 2. Not sure if this counts. Wife runs one. Had a day off from work and a 6-year-old sits at the table next to me and we start talking about different fish in the world. His parents were divorced and they have split custody, and his sister only comes part-time. So I grab my phone and we look up different tropical fish and whatnot. After a bit, he tells me he only likes his mom and sister, hates his dad, stepmom, and stepbrother. Talks about how he is going to light his dad's house on fire with the people he hates still in it. I told his stepmom about it when she came to pick him up. He went to therapy for a while. His real mom gets a new boyfriend every month or so. Apparently, one has given him swirlies a few times, and another was a convicted child molester. The dad reports this shit to CPS, but they never do anything about it. Story 3. Not really a shocking secret, but it got a laugh out of me. I had my preschoolers rounded up for circle time. Going off their interests of the day, I decided to ask who was a boy and who was a girl, since that's what happened to be the one thing every 3-year-old cared about that day. Through the sea of children, I hear a couple responses. I'm a boy, I'm a girl, etc. Then out of nowhere, all the way in the back, I hear, I'm black. He sure was. God, I miss that class. Good times. Story 4. Not a daycare worker, but I used to have a tax practice. A client came into my office to drop off his tax paperwork with his 5 kids, ages 3 to 10, in tow. He said he needed to go run an errand and left, leaving the kids in my office, for me to babysit while I worked on his taxes. The kids were shy, quiet, and well-behaved, but the youngest finally started a conversation with me. My daddy hits my mommy. Story 5. I once had CPS call on my parents because I told my daycare worker there was nothing to eat and I was starving. True story was my mom hadn't had time to get groceries and asked my dad to go before I left for daycare, saying something like, "Could you pick up the groceries? I don't want her to starve for another day tomorrow." I actually had breakfast that morning, but not the usual, and refused to eat it all. I never saw my mom so embarrassed ever again. Story 6. My husband and I went on vacation for a week and left my then kindergartner with my mother-in-law. The small weirdo was caught eating dog food out of a sandwich baggie on the playground during recess, literally 12 hours after we left. His excuse to the teachers? Grandma won't feed me. His excuses to Grandma? The dogs like it a lot, so I wanted to try it. Thank everything holy the teachers knew us and Grandma. No scary CPS calls were made and everyone, save for Grandma, had a good laugh. Grandma locked up the dog food until we came back. Story 7. When my son was 3, I bought my wife Titanic on video. Yes, it was a long time ago. For her birthday. He asked if he could watch it after nursery school. We said that it wasn't really a film for children. It was a film for grown-ups, like Mommy and Daddy. When I picked him up later, his nursery teacher was stifling her laughter as he had been telling everyone all day that it was his mom's birthday that day and that Daddy had bought Mommy a special video that only mommies and daddies could watch. Story 8. My niece, 3 or so at the time, was in the car with her mom. Windows are down as it's a nice day. She's sitting in the front seat, which was not illegal then. No airbags, yo. They pull up to a stoplight next to another car. This car was being driven by a larger lady, and she also had her window rolled down. Niece screams out the window, "Move it or lose it, you fat cow." Mom had a come-to-Jesus meeting with herself about her road rage that day. Story 9. I teach 2-year-olds, and we were asking the kids what their parents' names were just to see if they knew. I asked a little boy, "What's Mommy's name?" He says Michelle. Then I asked, "What's Daddy's name?" And he looks confused, as if he's trying to figure out the answer, but can't. So I ask, "What does Mommy call Daddy?" Assuming he would say John, instead he looked up at me and said, "Big Papa." I couldn't help but burst out laughing. I like that you were trying to teach them this. Too many times lost kids look at that question and answer, "Duh, mommy." Story 10. My mom was a teacher, and one time the fire department came in to educate the kindergarten kids. They asked the kids to name different things in the house that are hot: the stove, the fireplace, etc. Then one kid raises his hand and says, "The weed is hot." I don't think anything ever came of it. It was not the nicest neighborhood, and this kind of thing wasn't all that surprising. Story 11. I once had a little girl tell me she saw daddy licking mommy like a doggy. That was hilarious and awkward. There were a handful of really sad cases where children would disclose neglect or abuse. One girl in particular had a meltdown one day when she had an accident in her underwear. Turned out that her mom would slap her around just gently enough to not leave a mark and lock her in a closet when she misbehaved, which included accidents. Needless to say, we reported the mother to CPS and did a rush job washing the girl's clothing so she could go home in the same clothes she wore to school, without her mom knowing about the accident. Lots of kids spilling the beans on new pregnancies or divorces, arguments between parents, or infidelity. Kids see and hear a lot, and they tend to have incredibly good memories of that kind of stuff. I'm just going to add that they seem to have a pretty good memory in general. I now just ask my 3-year-old daughter where I put whatever I'm trying to find, and she always knows where it is, whether it's my keys, wallet, or the remote. Story 12. When I was a preschool teacher, we got a new student who would describe her home life to us often. One time, she told a story that basically translated to her mom clogging the toilet and her dad struggling to unclog it. She would tell us so much about her home life, we even warned her mom to be careful because she would repeat everything she sees. Story 13. I used to work at a church during the summer, and one time a little boy just up and told me as we were walking to the chapel that his daddy spanks his mommy with a wooden spoon after they go to bed. Obviously nothing illegal here, but it was a funny story, and the parents were informed that their little angel knew of their shenanigans and to have a talk with him. Story 14. With a group of 3-year-olds, we were coloring paper ties for Father's Day and talking about what their dads like to do. As the kids were calling out their dad's hobbies, one little girl had an epiphany. She gasped and shouted in excitement, "I have a dad!" She had recently been adopted by her foster parents. Story 15. I was a nanny, and one time the 3-year-old asked me, out of the blue, why do daddy and mommy always go, clearly sexual noises, after bedtime? I just burst out laughing and said that maybe they are working out. Story 16. I dated a girl with 2 kids. I was watching them while she went to the doctor. She had a serious medical problem, and she wanted the kids to not be there and see her all stressed out. Was watching Toy Story with her 3-year-old daughter. I guess the daughter started understanding that her mom and I are more than friends. She said, "Would you hit Mama?" I was shocked, and I said, "Of course not. What put the idea in your head?" And she teared up and said, "My daddy used to hit her." And she started crying. I just did my best. I explained to her that I would never hurt any of them, and how people who love each other should behave, and that her dad had a sickness that caused him to act strangely. He was an addict. I got her a popsicle, and she calmed down as Buzz Lightyear and Woody were flying into the car. I was aware that their dad hit their mom, but I didn't even know the daughter witnessed it or would even remember. Story 17. My grandma owns a home daycare, and a female toddler that she babysat decided to try and pull down a male toddler's pants and kiss his pee-pee. My grandma immediately asked her where she learned that, and she said, "My daddy." My grandma reported it, and an investigation was done, and her family was actually very grateful that she did it. Even her dad. An investigation was done, and they found nothing wrong, and the parents 100% cooperated. Kids sometimes just say odd things, but they were glad to know that my grandma takes those sort of things seriously. So I guess it's not a family secret, but my grandma certainly thought it could have been at the time. Story 18. Not a secret, and not a daycare worker, but I do work with young children at a private tutoring company. But a little girl, just turned 6, at my workplace once turned to another girl who was being disruptive and calmly said, "Go and see a therapist, darling. You sound like you need one." It was hilarious at the time, but also kinda sad that the girl had heard that phrase often enough to be able to parrot it during an argument. Hopefully she just watches reality TV on Bravo. Story 19. They tell me everything. If you lie to your daycare worker, your child will spill the beans. I have lots of 3-year-olds struggling with potty training. Every single parent will tell them they're working with the child at home. Your kid will tell me if that's true or if you're just putting them in diapers as soon as you get home. Biggest thing I've been told. One little girl mentioned how her grandma tries to breastfeed her. Her grandma picked her up every day from daycare and had her just about all afternoon with her, alone. We called parents and cops. An investigation was done, and Grandma admitted to holding her like she was nursing, but claimed they were just cuddling. From my conversation with the little one, it sounded like it was definitely going on. She was really detailed for an almost 3-year-old. Grandma walked away unscathed and still picked the little girl up from daycare regularly. Story 20. When my daughter was 2, I had her little brother. Sometime when he was around 9 months old, she got pretty sick of him, and she was also in her daddy is king phase. So she would go around saying, "Daddy is my daddy, but he's not little brother's daddy." I always wondered if she spread that rumor at daycare as well. Story 21. I had a kid call me a bitch before and slap me on the face. That one was fun. He was in the foster system, so he had already been through some things, I'm sure. It wasn't a secret, but having a pair of 4 to 5-year-old sisters revealed to me the details of their father's motorcycle accident that led to his death was heartbreaking. It all starts with, "My daddy is dead," and ends with, "He wasn't wearing a helmet." Spoiler alert, the story is terribly tragic and lengthy. Oh, a girl who has a questionable home life pointed to a cop car and said, "It's the popo. They took mommy away once, and now I don't have a mommy anymore." Story 22. Not super shocking, but I worked at a daycare for a couple of years, and the 2 stories I remember the most was when a little girl said to me, when daddy takes a bath, mommy shaves his back, and another little girl that admitted when her dad watches her in the tub, sometimes he would drop a turd in the toilet. That latter one, her dad came to pick her up that day, and I could not look him in the eye. Story 23. Pretty mild, but a surprising and cute slip-up. I was working in a 4-year-old classroom. We're drawing pictures, having a great time, and a little girl is showing off her art. There's a stick figure for mommy, daddy, little sister, herself, and one more. They're a family of 4. I inquire about the 5th stick figure, and the artist casually says, "Oh, that's the baby in mommy's belly." Dad came to pick up that afternoon, and we delicately asked if his wife was expecting. Not everyone likes to share that info, especially early on. His response? "Oh, shit, we forgot to tell daughter she couldn't tell anyone yet." Busted via preschool art. Story 24. I worked at a gym childcare center in high school, and a pair of 4-year-old twins, one who appeared to be mentally disabled, with an older sister came in. Not 3 years old, but not very old. The little boy had these weird scars all over his arms and legs like old cut marks healed over. The older girl, maybe 5 or 6, noticed me looking and calmly explained that it was from when his twin sister had gone after him with a knife and rolled up her sleeves to show me the same marks all over her arms. Apparently, the younger girl had serious issues and her parents apologized for not warning me when they came to pick her up. Never saw them again. Creepiest little girl I've ever seen. Story 25. Oh my. I can't believe this isn't one of the first ones that popped into my head. There was a little girl and boy, about 3 and 1. They were in foster care and had great foster parents. Well, they would get picked up about once a week by a social worker and taken to their parents for visits. Well, one time, when they came back from the first unsupervised visit, the little 1-year-old started breathing really heavy and raspy, and then all of a sudden barely breathing at all. We think maybe an allergic reaction to something? Of course, we called an ambulance. Then not even 10 minutes after he's off to the hospital, it happens to the little 3-year-old. But then she starts throwing up too, and then not being able to breathe. So we're all like, WTF is going on? The owner goes to the hospital with the kids and calls later to let us know what is going on. Turns out the real parents poisoned both of the kids. They turned out okay. The little boy had a lot more in his system and was in the hospital for a few months. But overall, everything went back to normal. Needless to say, the parents went to prison. Their reason for doing it was because if they couldn't have them, no one else was raising them. Which made no sense because they were fairly close to getting them back. You never know how shitty some parents can be until you work in childcare. Because so many people have asked me this before. I mean the owners of the daycare, not of the children. Story 26. My kindergarten class had parent volunteers come in sometimes to help with projects. My mom signed up and came one day, but the other mother who was supposed to also come in called out sick. At recess, my mom saw the mother's son and said something like, "Hi, kid name. I heard your mommy was sick and I hope she feels better. Is she okay?" The boy said, "Yeah, she's okay, but the balloon in her booty popped and she had to go to the doctor to get it fixed." Basically, she called out because her breast implant leaked or had some issue. Not really shocking, just kind of funny. Story 27. Old girlfriend's mom used to travel for work often and would leave her with her father for days on end. She says that her daughter would say that she was warm belly when mom came back from her trips, and cold belly when she was gone. Girlfriend's mom figured her daughter just missed her. Come to find out that the dad wasn't feeding her when the mom went on these trips. Story 28. Not a daycare teacher, but a parent. Little one was about 3.5 when I got a very serious phone call from her daycare to come in and talk about a comment my child had made. Jump in the car and zoom there as quickly as I could, and there was a police car already there. We get into the office to talk about what's happening. My child had told her teacher the marks on her chest and back were from when I beat her. Police officer looks at me and tells me this is very serious, and I'm just about to burst into tears because I can't imagine why my beautiful daughter would say such a thing. Then I remembered what was actually on her chest and back and burst out laughing like a maniac. My daughter had hives from an allergic reaction a couple of days before, and they were still slightly visible even with the cortisone cream and antihistamines we were prescribed by the doctor. Had to explain I never beat my child. She had thought that because she had hives, it meant she had bees living in her, and by having to take medicine and have a special cream, that I was being her to get rid of all the bees. Police officer had a good giggle, and the daycare teacher looked like she had swallowed some lemons when I pointed out that only hours before I had just handed her all the proper documents, doctor's note, description of her allergy, allergy plan, etc., along with the bag of cream and medication for the hives. Story 29. Not a daycare worker, but something rather similar. I helped with foster children for a long time, and one who was in the process of being taken from her mother, 3 years old, told me giggling that Mel was sucking mommy's boob. Mel was her grandmother. She also told me that when she was a little tiny, her mom put her in a crib and a scary man came into the room and grabbed mommy and jumped all over her while mommy screamed, "No, my baby is watching. Stop, stop." Story 30. 2-year-old girl to my mother, her nursery teacher. My mother says you're black. My mother. Yes, I am. 2-year-old. My mother says she doesn't like black people. My mother is obviously black and a nursery teacher in a country where most other black African American Europeans people are temporary residents only, so most locals have never really interacted directly with black people. Bonus, this little girl is light brown-skinned Arab and apparently was also told by her mother that she is white. ETA. Deets about little girl's physical appearance. Also, I won't go into a debate about the whole Arabs classified as Caucasian or white on censuses in the US thing, but essentially my point was that regardless of if we believe that girl was white or not, her conversation with my mother reflects that she absorbed what her mother told race. That's her introduction to race relations, that her mother doesn't like black people. It was shady on her mother's part at best and irresponsible and potentially damaging at worst. Story 31. It was a 2-year-old, but I knew that mommy was having a baby before daddy did. It wasn't daddy's baby. Story 32. When we lived in Japan, my son went to a 24-hour daycare. There was one little boy there that was there for 2 weeks before the authorities were brought in. He was abandoned, apparently.